Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. Silence has a gravity of its own. It pulls attention without ever asking for it. Think about that for a second. Psychologists say humans can detect confidence and threat in less than a second of eye contact. That's why some people turn heads the moment they walk into a room, without even opening their mouths. And when it comes to Sigma females, this effect gets dialed up to a level that borders on unsettling. It's not because she's pretty or mysterious. That's the cliché everyone else repeats. People stare at her because she distorts the script, flips expectations, and radiates a presence that feels impossible to ignore. She can sit in the corner sipping coffee, and still half the room will wonder, why does she look like she knows something the rest of us don't? And here's the funny part, she's not even trying. While others spend hours perfecting poses for Instagram, she just exists, and somehow makes existing look like an art form. So, why do people stare at Sigma females? Let's break down the 12 brutally honest, extraordinary reasons that will make you see her through entirely new eyes. Number 1. Her self-containment is rare. Her self-containment is the kind of quality that most people don't even have the vocabulary to explain, but they can feel it instantly. In a world where everyone seems to be leaking insecurity, leaking need for attention, leaking desperation for validation, she stands sealed, whole, untouched. She doesn't seem to require anything external to keep herself running, and that's what makes her magnetic. People stare because she doesn't orbit around anyone else's approval. She doesn't broadcast neediness, she doesn't chase reactions, and she doesn't bait people into giving her something she should already have within herself. Most people are dependent on others to regulate how they feel. A compliment makes their day. A criticism ruins their week. Sigma females don't hand out that kind of power. If she's at peace, it's because she created it. If she's happy, it's not borrowed from someone else's attention, it's generated internally. That unnerves people because it strips away the usual hooks society relies on. If you can't guilt her, flatter her, or manipulate her emotions, what do you do with her? The answer is usually, you stare. There's also something subtly threatening about someone who doesn't need the external world to prop them up. It challenges the way others live. When a Sigma female walks into a room radiating that kind of wholeness, she forces people to confront the cracks in their own sense of self. They realize they're pieced together by likes, compliments, gossip, or group approval, while she's stitched together by her own standards. That kind of quiet independence makes people linger on her longer than they mean to, trying to figure out what fuels her. Even her relationships carry this energy. She loves without clinging, she connects without dependency, and she shares without draining. She doesn't complete anyone, and she doesn't ask to be completed. People stare because she looks like someone who could walk away from everything, friendships, jobs, even romantic attachments, and still be entirely herself. There's no hole inside her that someone else needs to fill. It's rare to see someone who feels this self-fed, this self-contained, especially in a culture where almost everyone is addicted to validation. That rarity alone makes her unforgettable. People don't just look at her, they study her, sometimes unconsciously because she carries something they crave but can't define. Selfhood that isn't rented, borrowed, or faked. She is enough on her own, and that is a sight people can't help but stare at. Number 2. She makes time feel slower around her. She has a way of moving through the world that makes everything around her feel like it's happening in fast forward while she stays in her own tempo. Her pace isn't sluggish, but it's never rushed either. It's deliberate, measured, and calm in a way that unnerves people used to constant urgency. When she walks into a room, she doesn't scramble to match the energy already there. She brings her own, and others unconsciously fall into it. Suddenly conversations slow down, movements feel less frantic, and people find themselves adjusting to her rhythm without realizing it. That's why eyes follow her. She doesn't speed up for anyone, but somehow, everyone slows down for her. This quality makes her feel untouchable because she never looks like she's in survival mode. She's not chasing the next moment or rushing to prove something. Instead, she occupies time in a way that looks like mastery, as if she knows something everyone else forgot, that life isn't a race. That calm confidence is magnetic. because it stands in sharp contrast to the anxious, over-caffeinated pace of the modern world. People stare at her because being near her highlights just how frantic their own energy really is. Her slow, steady presence also makes her feel heavier in the best sense. Even small actions like reaching for a glass of water or turning her head look loaded with intention. It's not performance, it's awareness. That awareness makes everything she does seem important, which keeps eyes locked on her. In a way, she doesn't just occupy space, she occupies time. What makes this even more powerful is that she isn't trying to control anyone. Her unhurried energy naturally shifts the atmosphere. People drawn to her often can't explain why they're so fascinated. It's because she doesn't compete with the chaos. She absorbs it, slows it down, and bends the tempo of the room until everyone is, consciously or not, playing by her rhythm. It's rare to see someone who doesn't bend to the clock, the crowd, or the pressure of the moment. A Sigma female carries time like it belongs to her, and that's why people stare. She reminds them of something they secretly crave, the ability to move through life unshaken, unhurried, and completely in control of their own pace. Number 3. Her stillness feels aggressive. Her stillness is not the fragile kind that comes from shyness or hesitation. It's the heavy, immovable kind that unsettles people without her saying a single word. Most people can't sit in silence without fidgeting, tapping their fingers, scrolling on their phones, or blurting out small talk to fill the air. She doesn't do any of that. She can sit in a room, calm and composed, and her very lack of movement feels louder than everyone else's noise. That's why people stare, because her silence doesn't read as absence, it reads as presence. There's something almost confrontational about a woman who doesn't feel the need to perform, appease, or over-explain herself. Her stillness creates a mirror, forcing people to notice their own restlessness in contrast. While others squirm, she remains composed, and that makes people wonder, what gives her the confidence to not flinch when everyone else does? That unspoken question is what keeps eyes locked on her. Her calm presence feels aggressive because it strips away the usual social scripts. People are used to quick smiles, nods, and little signals of comfort. She doesn't hand them out casually. She's not rude, but she doesn't pacify anyone either. That absence of expected behavior forces people to sit in their own discomfort, and the easiest way to cope is to keep looking at her, searching for clues. It's also about control. Stillness suggests she's not being pulled by anyone else's energy. She's not reacting, she's observing. And when someone observes without revealing much, it shifts the power dynamic. Others feel as if they're under quiet inspection, even if she's just minding her business. That subtle psychological dominance makes her impossible to ignore. What makes it even more compelling is that her stillness doesn't feel empty. It feels full of restraint, full of thought, full of unspoken certainty. People instinctively sense that behind her silence is not weakness, but calculation. That's why it feels almost aggressive, even though she hasn't lifted a finger. In a noisy world where everyone tries to be noticed by being louder, her refusal to compete creates its own kind of command. Stillness becomes her weapon, and people stare because they're not used to someone wielding silence like it's more powerful than words. Number 4. Her movements are economical. Her movements carry the kind of precision that makes people pause, even if they don't consciously know why. Nothing about her body language is excessive. She doesn't wave her hands wildly when she speaks, she doesn't shuffle aimlessly, and she doesn't fidget to bleed out nervous energy. Every step she takes, every glance she shifts, every small motion seems to serve a purpose. That efficiency stands out because most people are constantly leaking energy, tapping their feet, over-explaining with their hands, performing expressions they don't really feel. Compared to that chaos, her economy of movement looks almost alien. This restraint isn't cold, it's powerful. It signals control, the kind of self-mastery that makes people wonder if she's even capable of being rattled. When someone never wastes their motions, it gives the impression that they never waste their focus either. People begin to project depth onto her, assuming she must think before she acts, that she doesn't throw herself into things carelessly. That quiet discipline fascinates observers because it suggests a mind as sharp and efficient as her movements. What unnerves people most is how she manages to command attention without flailing for it. A simple tilt of her head or the deliberate crossing of her legs can carry more impact than someone else's exaggerated gestures. By not overperforming, she forces others to slow down and notice the subtleties. It's the opposite of how the loudest person in the room grabs attention. She does it by stripping everything unnecessary away. Her economical movements also create mystery. Because she doesn't reveal much physically, people fill in the blanks with their imagination. They stare, waiting for some sign, some slip, something to decode, but she rarely gives it. That restraint keeps her unpredictable, which makes her even more magnetic. On a deeper level, people stare because her efficiency challenges their own lack of control. They notice how often they spill over, overreact, or overcompensate. Watching her exposes the contrast. She looks like someone who owns her energy, while they often feel drained by theirs. That quiet lesson is unsettling, but it's also irresistible. Her presence proves that power isn't always about doing more, it's about doing less with intent. And that's why people can't stop watching her. Her smallest movements carry more weight than someone else's entire performance. Number 5. Her style isn't trendy, it's surgical. Her style doesn't scream for attention, but it demands it all the same. She doesn't chase trends or dress to match the season's dictates. Instead, every choice looks like it's been cut with precision, sharp, intentional, and almost surgical in the way it defines her. There's no wasted detail, no loud branding, no desperate attempt to look current. She doesn't look like she belongs to the era. She looks like the era couldn't touch her if it tried. That's why people stare, because her clothes don't just cover her, they code her, like a language only she understands. What makes it even more striking is the absence of effort written all over it. It's not the forced, effortless chic you see on social media, where people spend 3 hours making sure their outfit looks like it took 3 minutes. Her style carries no desperation. She wears what amplifies her presence, not what earns her validation. And that subtle defiance of fashion's constant noise makes her stand out louder than anyone overdressed in the latest hype. People are used to seeing clothing used as camouflage, a way to blend in with a tribe or advertise belonging to a social group. Sigma females don't dress to belong, they dress to define. It's why her outfits seem immune to dating themselves. 5 years from now, she'll still look current because she was never playing by current rules in the first place. Her wardrobe has the precision of a scalpel, not the flashiness of a billboard. And here's the twist that catches people off guard. Her choices look tailored not just to her body, but to her energy. She knows exactly what frames her confidence, what colors amplify her mood, and what textures match her pace. That level of self-awareness comes across in her style, and people pick up on it, even if they can't articulate it. They stare because her look doesn't feel borrowed, it feels owned. In a culture addicted to trends, her fashion is a quiet rebellion. She's not saying, "Look at me," but rather, "This is me." And that difference is why people can't help staring. She makes every piece of clothing she wears feel like it was made for her alone, as though the outfit is a tool in her arsenal, not a costume for attention. Her style isn't about fitting into fashion's carousel, it's about cutting through it with surgical precision. Number 6. She has the kind of silence that feels loud. Her silence doesn't melt into the background the way most people's does. It expands, filling the space until everyone has to acknowledge it. She doesn't need to raise her voice or announce her presence because her quiet does the work for her. It's the kind of silence that feels thick, almost charged, like the air before a storm. People find themselves looking at her not because she's demanding attention, but because her lack of noise feels like an unspoken dare. Who's actually in control here, you or me? Most people are conditioned to smooth out social interactions with chatter, with nervous laughter, with constant noise to prove they belong. When she refuses to play that game, the absence of words feels louder than the words themselves. It unsettles people because they can't read her. They can't tell if she's judging, if she's amused, if she's indifferent, or if she knows something they don't. That uncertainty makes their eyes drift toward her again and again, as if staring long enough will reveal the secret. Her silence isn't passive, it's active. It reshapes the mood of a room. People lower their own voices, shift uncomfortably, or even try harder to impress just to fill the space she leaves empty. Without saying anything, she forces others to reveal themselves. That's why it feels loud, because while she says nothing, everyone else ends up saying too much. There's also a weight to her quiet that makes people instinctively assign meaning to it. If someone else sits silently, they're overlooked. But when she does, it feels intentional, deliberate. It's as though her very silence has edges, cutting through the noise and separating her from the crowd. People sense that she isn't silent because she has nothing to say. She's silent because she doesn't need to prove herself. And that difference turns her quiet into a spotlight. In a world where constant talking, posting, and performing has become the norm, her refusal to contribute to the noise is jarring. She becomes the exception, the still point everyone else orbits around without understanding why. That's why people stare. They're not just looking at her, they're trying to decode the weight of a silence that feels louder than any voice in the room. Number 7. She looks like she knows secrets about you. There's a sharpness in her expression that makes people uneasy, like she's already one step ahead of them. It's not that she's glaring or trying to intimidate. She doesn't have to. Her eyes linger just long enough. Her face holds just still enough that people start to wonder what she's seeing that they don't want exposed. That quiet intensity gives off the impression that she's reading between the lines of every word, every gesture, every slip in their body language. And because most people walk around with masks they hope others won't notice, being near her feels like standing in front of someone who can see straight through the disguise. It's unsettling because she doesn't even need to speak to create that effect. A single glance from her can feel like a silent evaluation, as if she's filing away information for later use. People don't know if she's judging, predicting, or simply observing, but the not knowing is exactly what rattles them. The human mind hates uncertainty, and her unreadable look creates exactly that. So people stare almost involuntarily, hoping to figure out what she sees, or to reassure themselves that she hasn't seen too much. That sense of being decoded triggers paranoia. Someone might replay their own words after talking to her, wondering if they revealed more than they meant to. Others might suddenly feel self-conscious about flaws they normally hide well. The truth is, she's not always dissecting anyone, but her presence creates the illusion that she could, and that's enough to make people nervous. What makes this even more magnetic is the calmness with which she carries it. She doesn't weaponize her gaze or use it to dominate, she simply observes, and that restraint makes her seem even more dangerous. Because when someone can see through you but doesn't announce it, you start to wonder what they're keeping to themselves. That thought alone is enough to keep eyes darting back toward her, as if checking to see if she's smirking at some private truth. People stare at her, not because she's trying to expose them, but because she represents the possibility of being seen too clearly. And in a world where everyone carefully curates their image, nothing is more unnerving or more magnetic than a woman who looks like she already knows the parts of you you're trying to hide. Number 8. Her beauty isn't the point. Her energy is. Her presence proves that beauty alone isn't what turns heads. It's energy. Even if she doesn't fit the narrow, polished standards of conventional attractiveness, people still find themselves drawn to her. There's a current around her, something that overrides symmetry, makeup, or fashion. It's the way she carries herself. The steadiness in her gaze, the sharpness of her boundaries. That energy is what makes people stare because it can't be manufactured, bought, or filtered into existence. This is especially unsettling for people who build their entire identity on surface-level beauty. They're used to being the ones who get attention simply by walking into a room. But when she enters, the usual rules shift. It becomes obvious that beauty fades into the background when energy takes over. People don't look at her the way they look at someone pretty. They look at her with curiosity, sometimes even with unease, because she feels bigger than the face she wears. Her energy makes beauty irrelevant because it carries weight that beauty alone can't hold. She looks like someone who could strip away the glamour, the makeup, the aesthetics, and still dominate a room. That's a kind of presence that shakes the ground beneath those who depend on appearances to hold attention. It makes them realize how fragile beauty actually is when it isn't backed by power. People stare at her because she makes them question what they've been taught to value. They're forced to notice that their eyes keep returning to someone who doesn't beg for validation, doesn't pose for approval, and doesn't even compete in the beauty arena. She's not playing the same game, and yet she's winning without lifting a finger. That's the paradox. She doesn't need to be beautiful in a traditional sense because her essence overshadows it. Her energy radiates authority, depth, and individuality, which hits harder than any surface-level prettiness. She makes people feel that beauty is too small a word to contain her. And that's why they stare, not because of what she looks like, but because of who she is radiating through every glance, every move, every unspoken signal. In her presence, beauty stops being the conversation. Energy becomes the point. And that is something far rarer, far harder to copy, and impossible to ignore. Number 9, she doesn't offer social returns. What unsettles people most about her is how she breaks the unwritten rules of social exchange. In everyday interactions, there's an expected rhythm. You smile, the other person smiles back. You nod, they nod. You throw out a polite hello, they return it. These little social returns act like currency. We give them and receive them to reassure ourselves that everything is normal. But with her, that currency doesn't circulate. She doesn't always smile back. She doesn't rush to wave or nod just because someone else does. She withholds the automatic responses everyone else has been trained to deliver. This throws people off balance. At first, they might think she didn't notice, so they try again, only to be met with the same calm lack of reaction. The absence of return feels like rejection, but not a loud, hostile kind. It's quieter, sharper. It makes people hyper-aware of themselves, as if they suddenly need to question why they even reached out in the first place. That tiny gap between expectation and reality pulls eyes toward her, waiting for something that never comes. What makes it even more powerful is that she doesn't do this to be rude. It's not arrogance, it's precision. She doesn't hand out validation just because it's socially expected. When she does return a smile or a nod, it means something, because it's real. That rare authenticity makes people crave her acknowledgement more, but the scarcity of it keeps them staring, hoping for it. This refusal to play along with scripted politeness is a quiet disruption to social order. Most people don't realize how much they depend on these tiny exchanges to feel seen. When she doesn't give them, it exposes just how fragile their sense of belonging is. They stare because they're unsettled, because their brains are wired to seek completion in the pattern. And she's the only one not completing it. Over time, this makes her look untouchable. She isn't rude, but she isn't accessible either. She reserves her responses for when they actually matter, and that makes her presence sharper than anyone who scatters smiles like confetti. People watch her because they're waiting for that rare return, that signal of acknowledgement. And when it doesn't come, they keep staring, caught between frustration and fascination. Number 10. She looks untouchable in chaotic spaces. She has a way of standing in the middle of chaos without absorbing any of it, and that's what makes her magnetic. At parties where the noise drowns out thought, in workplaces where deadlines press like walls, or even in heated arguments where tempers flare, she doesn't unravel. Her calm sits there like a stone in the river, unmoved by the rushing current around her. People can't help but notice, because while they're swept up in the frenzy, she looks like she's operating on a completely different frequency. What makes this so powerful is the contrast. Most people mirror the energy of their environment. Loud when others are loud, stressed when others are stressed, defensive when others are defensive. But she doesn't bend like that. Her refusal to absorb chaos makes everyone else's loss of composure look exaggerated, almost childish. People catch themselves spiraling, then glance at her and realize how frantic they must look next to her unshaken stillness. That's where the embarrassment creeps in. Her untouchable calm isn't passive, it radiates authority. It sends the message that she isn't controlled by circumstances or crowds, and that makes people rethink their own behavior. They stare at her not just out of curiosity, but out of envy. She represents the kind of inner control they wish they had in the same storm. Even in conflict, when voices rise and emotions boil, she doesn't match the noise. She doesn't raise her tone to be heard, and she doesn't flail to make a point. That composure alone gives her the upper hand. People notice that power, and their eyes are drawn to her as if to anchor themselves in her steadiness. What unsettles people the most is that she makes it look effortless. She isn't straining to hold her calm, it simply belongs to her. While others burn themselves out in overreaction, she conserves energy and stays collected. That difference creates a kind of quiet dominance that feels impossible to ignore. In spaces where everyone else is unraveling, she stands out not because she's loud, but because she's untouchable. Her calm exposes the cracks in everyone else's self-control, and that revelation is both uncomfortable and mesmerizing. People stare because in her stillness, they see what they lack, and what they wish they could be. Number 11. Her presence interrupts comfort zones. Her presence doesn't slide neatly into anyone's pre-labeled folder, and that's exactly why people can't look away. Most of the time, the human brain takes shortcuts when it meets someone new. She's the sweet girl, he's the serious guy, that one's the loud friend. It makes people easier to process, but with her, those shortcuts collapse. She isn't soft enough to be boxed as harmless, but she isn't hard enough to be called cold. She's feminine in a way that isn't submissive, and sharp in a way that isn't masculine. The contradictions don't cancel each other out, they coexist, and that throws people off balance. That's why she interrupts comfort zones without even trying. People crave certainty, and she denies them that. One moment she radiates elegance, the next she carries an edge that feels untouchable. It's not performance, it's authenticity that doesn't obey categories. And because she isn't predictable, people stare longer, trying to solve her like a puzzle, searching for some familiar box to place her in. But the more they look, the less she fits. This lack of easy definition makes her both intriguing and unsettling. Someone might expect warmth and instead find steel. They might anticipate sharpness and suddenly glimpse softness. The constant shifting forces people to confront their own biases about what a woman should be, and that confrontation isn't comfortable. But discomfort draws attention just as much as beauty does, sometimes even more. She doesn't manage her presence to make others comfortable, and that's what makes it powerful. Most people bend themselves into roles for easier acceptance. She refuses. She shows up as a blend of contradictions, and that refusal to dilute herself creates tension in the air. People can't fully relax around her because she's not offering predictability. And yet, that very unpredictability is what makes them unable to look away. Her presence acts like static in the brain's wiring. Familiar signals break down, and suddenly people are alert, trying to figure her out. That heightened awareness keeps eyes on her far longer than on anyone who fits neatly into expectation. She doesn't blend, she interrupts. And in doing so, she forces people out of their comfort zones. That interruption is why people stare. She isn't an easy answer, she's an unsolved equation, and humans can't resist staring at the unknown. Number 12. She looks like she could leave without looking back. There's an unmistakable quality about her that unsettles people. She carries herself like someone who could walk away at any moment and never flinch. It's not arrogance, and it's not coldness. It's the quiet confidence of knowing she doesn't depend on anyone or anything to define her. That aura alone makes people stare, because most people live with invisible chains. They cling to relationships, jobs, and social circles out of fear of being alone. She doesn't. And when someone radiates that kind of emotional mobility, it unsettles the very ground others stand on. What makes her presence so striking is the absence of attachment signals. Most people give off subtle cues that they're invested in approval or belonging. They lean in too much, laugh too loudly, or scramble to prove their worth. She doesn't leak that desperation. Her calm says, "I enjoy being here, but I don't need to be here." That subtle difference creates a tension people can't ignore. They stare because she reminds them of the fragility of their own need for connection. At a deeper level, her aura taps into a primal fear, abandonment. Humans are wired to seek safety in groups, in bonds, in validation. When she enters a room and looks like she could vanish without hesitation, it pokes at that fear. People feel unsettled because they can sense she wouldn't beg to stay. Her independence highlights their dependency, and that contrast is almost too sharp to process. This doesn't mean she's unfeeling or incapable of attachment. In fact, her connections often run deeper because they aren't born from neediness. But from the outside, her ability to remain whole and unshaken with or without company makes people project their own insecurities onto her. They stare at her as if to ask, would she leave me too? Her presence is a quiet reminder that true freedom is not in holding on, but in knowing you can let go. And that kind of freedom is rare. That's why she stands out so strongly. She doesn't walk around announcing her independence, yet it hangs in the air around her like a warning. I don't belong to anything I can't walk away from. People stare because deep down they know they don't have that kind of power, and it scares them. What makes Sigma females so hypnotic is that they don't demand attention, yet they command it without effort. People stare not because of beauty alone, not because of mystery alone, but because every part of her presence disrupts what's ordinary. Her silence feels heavier than noise. Her movements carry more weight than performance. Her energy overshadows surface-level charm, and her independence, sharper than any trend or social script, makes her look like she could rewrite the rules of the room just by being in it. She unsettles people because she refuses to fit neatly into categories or play into expectations. She forces them to confront their own noise, chaos, insecurities, and need for validation, simply by existing outside of it. That's why eyes follow her. She doesn't chase recognition, yet it follows her like a shadow. In a world obsessed with attention-seeking, Sigma females prove that real magnetism isn't loud. It's controlled, deliberate, and authentic. And that's what makes people stare longer than they mean to. They're not just looking at her, they're seeing what they wish they could be. If you enjoyed this breakdown of what makes Sigma females impossible to ignore, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to understand why a Sigma female will always be the one people can't stop watching.